Hey guys, I'm going to try to give you a quick run through the Everrain. Well, to start off, you're going to have a ship. Your ship has little spots on it where your crew can go, and you also have a below deck section for improvements and also an area for your artillery. Your crew will be manned on the left here. You can have up to 4, and each one will have positive and negative traits. They also have things like the hit points, which are located by these little divots here, representing fatigue and strain. It shows you how well they do when they're exploring islands and how well they do when they're at port. The larger the number, the better. For each of those, you'll have to do tests every now and then where you roll a d10 and you need to get underneath your target number. They also show you how many attack dice they get right here, and it shows you how much they cost. This is how much to hire them from port, or also how much you need to spend to keep them employed at the end of each act. There's a whole collection of these positive and negative traits. Some affect you at port, like degenerate right here. Degenerate, whenever you go into port, you have to gamble or drink first, which costs money, and then you could go to a second location. And some which affect things at sea, like belligerent here, which adds 1 dice value while you're at sea. There's quite a few positive traits with the blue backing, and quite a few red traits with which are all negative. Every crew member has to have 1 positive and 1 negative trait. So if we look at my deckhand here, we'd place those like so. And there are cards for quick reference, or you can always just slide up and just see what they do. Now, as for improvements, they're usually marked with a circle if you have to send a crew there. In this case, the cabins, which you'll start with. You can recover 1 strain by sending a crew member there. Here we see the ship's boat. You can have 2 circles, so you could put 2 crew there, and you'd send a crew on expeditions on islands. Over here we have the diving bell. It gives you an additional dice when you're exploring shipwrecks. Shipwrecks will award you spoils. It looks like you need a crew member for that as well. And then some don't require crew members. So here we have the resplendent fingerhead, which just is a standard little benefit. You don't get strain for finishing your turn on deck. Normally, you suffer strain, which is essentially 1 hit point, every turn that you end a crew on deck. And there's quite a few reasons why you might want to end a turn with crew on deck. The first is you can see all these different spots on here. The red ones are for your artillery. So if you have a bow shooter, you have to have a crew there in order to fire it. Whenever you put a crew member on a navigation token, you add 1 to your movement. We also have a crow's nest, which lets you explore a tile before you go into it, which can be quite handy. And then there's a couple that you'll need to improve as you go. Each of these spots has a little number on it, and that tells you whenever you encounter an enemy and they destroy a section of the ship, you roll a d10 and you see what's destroyed. You could repair those in port, and there's probably some other special cards which will let you. So starting the game, you get your 2 deckhands, you get a ship, you get a couple improvements on your ship, but nothing too great. And you're going to start off in a calm sea space on the starter tile. Now this starting tile has a port, and you can go and visit the port to do a myriad of things. Buy more crew, get improvements for your ship, sell treasures. This here is a shipwreck. You can explore that shipwreck. Once it's explored, you have to mark it off. And that will let you roll on the spoils table and get any number of things. Rough sea, it's fine to have your ship in rough sea, but to leave it, it takes double the movement. So if I want to go from this rough sea over to the shipwreck, that takes 2 movement. To turn your ship, 1 space is 1 movement. So now you can see why you want a lot of movement. Now, you want to keep exploring, and the reason is simple. On the back of each of those, it tells you that they're worth clues. The advancing in this game requires 5 clues in order to advance you along 1 space on the track. The enemy has a much faster way to advance. They get to move a small token, 2 plus a number of players at the end of every turn, and whenever that reaches 10, they advance 1 space. So you need to constantly be advancing, collecting these clues, turning them in town in order to advance yourself to try to stay ahead of the enemy. So let's go ahead and see what this tile has. This tile is a little more dangerous. We have here a spot where an enemy ship will spawn. The enemy ship comes with a number of enemies equal to the act number, and it will seek to destroy your ship. Right here is an altar space, which is pretty nasty as well. Whenever a ship first enters a tile that has an altar space, they get an enemy on board. Then you need to go to the altar, you spawn a number of bad guys equal to the act level on your ship, and then the altar is destroyed. We also see we have an abandoned island. This is where the real fun comes in. When you encounter an island, you get to add this little thing onto your crew board. You, of course, have to have a way to get your crew to the island, a dinghy of some sort or a small ship, and then your crew gets to explore. The player to the right of you gets to shuffle around all these question mark symbols and place them anywhere they want on the island without looking. And then your goal is to get to the treasure here. That lets you draw a card, usually a story card. The question marks might have things like a clue, might have a little treasure, might have gold, or it might have a bad guy, which it hurts you. Every time you move on the island, it costs 1 strain on your guy. So you got to make sure that you have a guy who has a strain enough to get to the end, or a deckhand that you don't really care about and you're fine letting die on the island. When it's time to go into shore, you're going to have a denizen deck. Those have lots of various things that are kind of interesting. You'll probably want to encounter one of those when you're there. You also have quite a few little spots that you can go to. So here you can recover all your trauma, your fatigue and strain. That costs 10 coin. Here you can recover all trauma, but you need to roll the fate die. You might lose something pretty good. This is how you repair your ship if you don't have a way to repair while you're under sea. It is also where you go to install schematics. When you recover something like this, like the sick bay here, usually you'll find it as a schematic and it'll be faced this way. All you need to do is send a crew here, and then you can install it. This little symbol means you can install as many schematics as you have. You can also improve, so you draw 4 upgrades, and then you could buy any of those. Right here is where you can buy some treasures. Some treasures are free, which is nice. And you can also sell any treasures or schematics as much as you want for the value that's appropriate for them. The inn has things like drinking, gambling, resting. Hiring a crew, you draw 3 new crews, and there's quite a few different crews. But you'll draw them at random, and you can hire any number that you want. And then just listen to some little rumors about what might happen. You also have the university right here. So every time you have 5 clues, you advance your player discovery by 1 by going to the university. The way your turn works is pretty unique in this game. You have these little tokens, and you'll start off with 6 of them. And this will allow you to move a crew anywhere you want on the ship. This lets you move a standard 1 space, but you get to add 1 for every navigation point that you have a crew member on. This token lets you fire. There's quite a few times when you're able to spend a token in order to evade an enemy action or to change an omen die into an attack, which can be quite handy as well. Let's talk a little bit about the dice that we'll use. So standard crew dice, you have your crew attack dice and your evade dice. If we look down here, we can see we got damage dice, critical damage, omen, blank. Down here, omen, blank, evade. Omen allows you to spend 1 fresh order that you haven't exhausted yet to have any dice result. You got to be careful though, because you can only refresh 3 of your crew orders at the end of each turn, unless you have a special treasure, which lets you recover more. These being enemies have more options than the crew does. You have the move die section right here on the dice. You have the damage. Let me find a damage here. Looks like a pyramid. There it is. And you have the omen, which I just passed a second ago. The omen. So enemies are going to have special abilities that relate to their omens. They can always do a damage there, and they can also move. Now, it might not be applicable for an enemy to attack if there's no one near them. So if they roll 2 damage die, they can actually train that into 1 move. So there's a little section down here that just shows 2 of anything translates to a move or an attack. So enemies are always big jerks. This guy has 8 hit points and 4 attack dice. You can see that its omen rolls. If it rolls 1 omen, all crew on deck suffer 1 trauma, and then it moves below deck. Oh, and they move below deck. And then if it rolls 2 omens, it can advance the agenda 2 plus a number of players. Of course, this one only spawns in Act 3, which makes it kind of nice there. Helping us, we got all the treasures that we can find. So here's a rope. Now you can use the rope to pass an expedition without rolling the fate die. Oh, that's pretty nice. Or you can sell this rope for 15 gold. And you can also see that there's a town that'll buy it for less and a town that'll buy it for more. Oh, there we go. So if you can find those ports, you might be able to sell this for a bigger profit and buy it for cheap. At the core of the game, there's a bunch of different cards. Some that you resolve at sea, some in port. And then there's also the story deck. The story deck is going to be unique in that they all have these little numbers here. And if you encounter something that has you pull a story, you put it under the ongoing story pile. At the end of each act, you'll move those on top of their corresponding decks based on the back of whatever card you have. But they usually offer slightly better rewards if you can meet the challenge involved. There is over 100 of these when you have all of the expansions unlocked. So, the name of the game is to advance your player token along this track faster than the enemy can. At a certain point, wherever your group decides, based on if it's a short game, medium-length game, or a really long game, the enemy might reach there first. If that's the case, the Elder One spawns, and they have their own set of special rules depending on which Elder One you get. So in short, keep exploring, keep collecting those clues, keep buying some upgraded deckhands and upgraded crew parts so that your ship can meet the battle. And the difficulty does increase as each act goes on. There's a total of 4 acts that's spaced out however long of a game you want to play. And fight the good fight.